Okay, let's do this. Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's episode. I would like to speak about an interesting concept. The title of today's episode is Many Worlds in One World. And so the idea, pretty much the intention with this thought is that the human being experiences itself in one existential reality, but because it has various viewpoints on the same existential reality, it has, in some sense, multiple experiences of the same existential point. So what does that mean? That means you exist, but you are aware of your existence in various ways, which means a sort of kind of fragmentation of the states of being, kind of the texture of reality. As if the only reason you can say there's a difference between your dreams of the future or kind of reminiscences of the past between in comparison to the present moment is that the present moment has existential realness. Your past memories used to have existential realness, they have experiential validity, and the future in some sense still remains experientially valid, but existentially has not manifested yet. We are left with our the direction of our attention. I find the human being has to first find out the direction of their attention, and then they have to find out how to direct it. You must serve life, and then you must command life, and as you command life, you discover the cosmos is in service to a greater intelligence. This greater intelligence, I don't want to say it's God, I don't want to give it a shape, because the moment I start speaking about the unknown, I have limited the unknown to the limited. I have limited the limitless to the limited. And so that is, it doesn't help with the progress that we seek as creatures. Just a second, guys, I'm looking for something. I just got this random feeling to read for you a quote from Leo Tolstoy. He has this incredible sentence, Leo Tolstoy, where he says the strongest of all warriors are these two, time and patience. Okay. The evolution of attention beyond forms of thought is where we find ourselves. We have to, in some sense, analyze reality through the various dimensions it shows itself. In some sense, really, we don't have that much choice. Even though we have free will as existential creatures, we have free will of how the experience occurs. Existentially, nobody really has that much free will because prior to you being born, there is nobody to be free. Prior to individual objective existence, the subjective intelligence has not been limited and localized to a sort of container. We are kind of being shaped out of thin air and then becoming as shapeless to the degree of thin air. What that means is from nothing enters something, and then in the world of something, that something enters nothing. So, what it really means is that if you were an eternal being, this eternity is a dance between consciousness, between attention, moving from the attributeless to that which has attributes, moving from the known to the unknown, from the unknown to the known. So Mr. Within is saying rather than people on this planet can just stand and claim knowledge, they can claim a sort of intelligence or validity to reality. It's really not a picture that we can talk about the truth of this world. It's a dynamism. It's a kind of rhythmic abidance with the nature of how your mind is phenomena in this world. There's been moments in my life where I have died in front of myself. And even though a part of me has died, I have seen in that same space life to reemerge. What I'm saying is that your relationship with your mind has to do with its constant cyclical appearance and disappearance, which leads to the rhythmic natural existence. When we say we are creatures of nature, this doesn't mean we go hug trees, yay, we found the spirit of nature. It's like, no, it's not like that. It's that there is a sort of rhythmic program. Nature is a sort of program that is occurring, and it is occurring based on a sort of elemental language. That means how atomic existence is sequenced or in a certain way. So similarly, we can say when the world of matter is made of atoms, the world of thought is made of, in some sense, how can I tell you, the world of thought is made of language. It's made of words, and we have atoms. Words are the atoms for your thoughts, in some sense, you can say, for thoughts which at their greatest point will become endless sentences. You see, as I'm speaking, imagine this is one sentence I'm saying, right? But if I continue, this sentence has no end, and it's as if because you're alive, you don't know if there is an end. So there is this sense of continuity, and because your intelligence is identifying with the continual manifest aspects of your moment of being, you feel that's all there is. It's as if the dude only saw the edge of the painting of the Mona Lisa and thought that was the whole painting. It's like kind of impossible. So what that means is life will eventually demonstrate a sort of complexity where in that complexity there is a strange freedom. I have found it always to for there to be a sort of difficulty once you make the world multidimensional to try to figure out what the values of each dimension is. You see, we can say a dimension, we have to acknowledge it referentially. That means the only reason we can speak of dimensions is because we have considered the limits and the edges of a singular dimension. Where, like, this is point A, then there's point B and C and D and whatever kind of degree. It's all about movement of attention. And when the movement of attention becomes multidimensional, you have to take responsibility for the moment, because if you don't, you will nature's program will devour you. As I'm speaking to you right now, you can say I am a phenomena of your world, just like how the sun shines, just like how like the wind moves between the branches of the tree, like Mr. Within is giving you a talk right now. I can be said to be part of the external aspect of your moment, okay? And you are the internal aspect of your moment. So in some sense, the greater dimensions beyond our eyes have to do with how we study what the past did. You realize what the future could have done. And what we are left to is that eventually the ultimate responsibility of the future will go to the present moment, will go to the future, right? So we say that suffering, where does suffering live? Suffering lives in the past. Anytime you want something of this changing world, every moment changes. It's like the universe is changing in every moment, okay? This is why I say you're not a thought. You shouldn't take thoughts too seriously. As Aristotle says, it is the sign of an educated mind to entertain an idea without accepting it. What that means is you enter the world, yet at the end you step out. You experience life's glory and then watch as the sky above your head. There's this quote that says, "Do or do not, there is no try." Yoda from Star Wars says this. And what it really means is that whatever image you bring to the moment will continue. And that is the ultimate law. And that is the mystical level of perception where reality is not being hidden in beliefs. For young children, it has to be. Their illusion is how they grow. It's as if the child of humanity must make a mistake to realize what, in some sense, mustn't be done. Sometimes your direction comes from you not knowing where you have to go, but from knowing where you don't need to go. You see, it's as if the person can hold a bouquet of flowers in front of their nose, but at the same time, if they're standing beside a dumpster, regardless of how much they relate reality's joy or suffering level in accordance to the smell of the flowers, it's like the dumpster is right there. What that means is the environment is being a voice for the mind of the human, and this is what Mr. Within kind of realized, that the only way humanity can, not the only way, but a way humanity can thrive is to give its inner child freedom and to give its outer child the kind of the inner child and the outer man Outer man is rooted in existential responsibility, inner child is rooted in experiential freedom. These two avenues kind of become the wings of the bird, or become the wings of the plane of your existence, of your attention. And eventually what happens with the attention is that it changes its texture. So right now, if you have any emotion arise when I speak, it's because your sense of self is being associated. What that means is, like, our memories, our minds are so advanced, they are, to be honest, very evocational kind of designs. What I mean by that is that literally sense things happening in the environment evoke thought, evoke meaning, evoke subtext. If I ask you, where does the context to any concept come from, you see it, you cannot ignore the concept. You cannot ignore the physical design leading to the consciousness. Yet, you at the same time should not ignore how the consciousness has also led to the physical design. It's kind of strange. It's like intelligence popped up, like it grew, it separated itself from the earth to stand on it, and then when it stood on the earth, it's like, where am I from? Kind of like that question came. And because Mr. Within says there is an objective component and a subjective component to the moment. The moment has two dimensions, the subjective dimension, the objective dimension, and these two dimensions are instantaneously in one moment being experienced. What that means is, you can try it out for yourself. In any moment, there is objective phenomena occurring, but upon that subjective phenomena, kind of in the room of your mind, there is also subjective phenomena. And subjective phenomena is so crucial, because the subjective phenomena is what is leading to the many worlds in one world. The many minds on one earth. The reason we must be grateful for the shadow is because without it we would not see the light. Sometimes I ask myself, when I observe divinity, does that mean I am beyond divinity? When I observe anything, like let's say right now you watched a film called Divinity, yeah, would you be beyond that movie of divinity? Divinity, of course, it can be directed in two ways. There is the internal unknown and there is the external unknown. The internal unknown is what is more interesting than the external unknown, because the external unknown is so vast and it's so big that you cannot get an index of all material data. Literally, the cosmos is too big to measure. So we'll never know, kind of one of those kind of deals. So the internal unknown remains. Now the internal unknown, different people have acknowledged in different ways. If you were Carl Jung, the internal unknown would appear to you as the, in some sense, personal unconscious. And the personal unconscious has to do with your upbringing. That means whether you like it or not, you are a conditioned animal. You are literally like a piece of rock that has been sculpted into a certain design of intelligence. And what has sculpted you, you tend to take pride in, because what else could you do? You were defined by it. This is going to be kind of savage what I say, but I think I have to say it to kind of share its intensity. This is a terrible way of saying it, actually, but I have to say it. It was as if ideology raped freedom of mind. Every human being, their attention is a space. It's intelligent space, right? It's very funny. We think it's like We are thinking human beings in their science fiction, they write about like future alien contact, but at the same time, we don't realize to all the other species on this planet, we are the aliens. We are literally creatures that did something no other creature on this earth did to this level, to this capacity. So for me, this has been the true question. If there's multiple dimensions, evolution is not evolution. But if all of it is in one singular dimension, then evolution can be acceptable. Various states of mind bring with it various interpretation of the laws of the universe. Now, this brings into question something incredibly complex, because if the meaning of objective phenomena is being imposed in it, literally, like this object in front of me was an object, but then it suddenly became a computer. Okay, and the word computer harbors with it, brings with it, carries with it various connotations of other implications of thought. So what I'm trying to say is thoughts rarely walk alone. The only thought that walks alone is emptiness. Because it means a part of your mind has to be chaotic to the ordered limitation, and a part of your mind has to be ordered to its chaotic limitations. Do you believe it's like all these people trying to find their higher self? What about your lower self? How can you have a higher self without having the lower self? As long as you have a higher self, you also have a lower self. It is only when the self is no longer fragmented, the psyche, as modern psychology says, is no longer means to be a person. We have to realize to be a person is a space of freedom where free will can act upon. We just have to create an efficient consequence. That's most important. What that means is it's like every generation of people that are born, they're partying, imagine. Okay, so when they're partying, we have to make sure they don't create too much of a mess for the future generations that are going to be born on this planet and to party. There's certain doctrines, certain ways of thought where they say the point of life is to celebrate. Literally, these dudes, these people worship joy. Joy is their god. The secrets of the world oftentimes are just how the world is kept in ways you didn't know. And this is something so crucial, I have to say it, because I'm kind of in the driver's seat of it right now. There's something happens when your inner intelligence moves faster than your outer intelligence. That means something happens when you become intelligence-oriented creature. The domain of life, the domain of love, literally emotional intelligence, finds a separation. It's as if, just like how Rene Descartes said there was a mind-body dualism, one finds that their emotions are separate from their thoughts, so it's like a kind of mind-body, body-mind emotion triplism. I don't know what the word for it is. It's like this, it evolves into a triangular dimension. So right now, me and you, poetically, playfully, if I was to say, me and you are in the second dimension of existence. On an existential level, we are in the dualistic part of the universal sector. We are literally life forms that have opened their eyes to a certain form, and now from that form are interpreting life, and now realizing that that form was not only what their life was. There's more to you than meets the eye, and your heartbeat can testify. There's a very beautiful concept I share. This beautiful concept is, how would I say it to you? It's the concept of hearing the heartbeat of your civilization. Mr.Within has noticed that there has been many ways, paths directed up the mountain, but all of them have ignored the collective. I am telling you, the path to God means you must forget the individual's imagination. It means art is dead, was dead from the beginning. Certain strict ideological domains. Literally, I've lived in countries where there was incredible freedom of mind, and I've also lived in countries where there was not a freedom of mind. That means there was a sort of strange thought control vibe in the environment. So what that really means is when there's not freedom of thought, there's not freedom of speech. That means what's easy, it's like somebody said this, Elon Musk said it. He said, if they make you ask the wrong question, they don't have to worry about your answers. So what that really means, the question you're asking is the direction of your attention. When your attention changes direction, new worlds emerge. To study your attention means to, as Zen Master Dogen would say, literally, there's this great Zen Master Dogen quote where he says somebody came up to him, like some guy was busy, he just runs up to the Zen Master Dogen and it's like, hey man, I gotta go to work, tell me, what's this enlightenment? Can you tell me really quickly? And the guy was saying it so honestly and sincerely that Zen Master's like, holy shit, okay, I'll tell you. And so what happens is the guy says, the Zen Master Dogen says to study Buddha's way is to study the self. To study the self is to forget the self. To forget the self is to awaken to the nature of all things. And that's the most crucial point. What is that awakening to the nature of all things? That is feeling the heartbeat of civilization. Realizing freedom is what unites us, and freedom everybody can have. So what that means is your commonality with every other creature on this living rock, like on this rock that's alive. It's like all these creatures, all these different species. For me, like when I walk in nature, I'm seeing a coagulation of different biological phenomena, like natural phenomena. There's a different kind of vibe you get. Like I'm telling you, biologists have healthier minds than physicists. A biologist will be more of a humanist than a physicist, because a physicist is looking at the elemental level of reality where the stories of morality have not been added yet. For me, I kind of see religion was a stepping stone in our civilization, for our civilization. Because the religious mindset, to be honest, it all comes down to surrendering to the will of the universe. Like, what else can it be? You tell me, dear listener, in any story you've ever heard, what else can the character do in this story it's in? The character in the story can either become the setting, or it can just remain the character, or it can realize it is the storyteller, or eventually the desire for future to be something leaves you. And that's when you stand in the mentor's sphere. Believe it or not, it's a liberated non-causal state. When I say non-causal, think about that. So much of life is programmed. So much of this life is just meaningless design. We have to give it meaning. When somebody asks what is the meaning of life, they have forgotten that they're the one who gives meaning to it. How do you give meaning to life? Well, you give it to either a decision. Either your mind trusts itself, and the only way it can trust itself is if it trusts its whole moment, which means it's including the world. Your mind literally has to trust the world in order for your intelligence to be activated. Anything you don't trust, you lock down. Your intelligence locks down. This is why it's so easy to be cruel, because you see yourself so separate from the other that you don't feel you can have sympathy. It's a denial of empathy due to the laziness of responsibility. The ancient Greeks had this spirit of rhetoric, this kind of notion that there was the logos, this inner guiding voice within all creatures, spoke out through various human forms, as if the school of Athens was, to be honest, just a hall where people gave speeches, but it was more like energetic performances that were kind of conceptually enlightening. So when man kind of discovered fire, he used that fire in various ways. Similarly, when man created and sparked language into kind of in the mind of civilization, through the tribal dynamic, in some sense, when language came about, that language was very, very crucial, because you got to understand, people didn't have an alphabet at first. At first, if the letters led to words, and the words eventually pointed to how in the spaces between there were worlds. What that means is you might not believe it, but that space between every number, like between number 1 and 2, or 2 or 3, or any number, that space in between is infinite. It's an infinite void. If you want life to happen the way you want, it means you want the external reality to adjust to your inner reality. Highly unlikely. If you want, but if there's a realization that the inner reality has to adjust to the external reality, what that implies is that then the way the idea of yourself arises in the moment is not some pre-designed, preconditioned kind of thought. It's as if it is a response to the intelligence of the moment, how loud the soul of the moment is. I'm often incredibly, I think, through a social context, if I could say this, my own personal analysis of how kind of I am as a person is that I feel I have kind of reached a point of existential. It's as if like you stare into the emptiness of the world to a point where you realize the point of emptiness it's a flawed concept. So what I'm trying to say is that you are the unknown, and that is where divinity is. That is where the truth is. The truth of this world is unknown because we are just creatures on a rock in the middle of nowhere. we have created our own language and we're basking in our own free will, not realizing there's so much beyond our will. And so what do we do? What do we do in a changing world? Well, the ultimate truth is you have to change with it. When you change with life, that is where only you're on an emotional dimension you can feel eternal. When you are in alignment and rhythm with the cosmos, when you become a member of a civilization where the civilization has waited for your arrival. It's as if a child is born and the civilization is so conscious that when that child suddenly reaches a state of awareness, the archetypes of its mind are gravitated. Every DNA brings with itself a sort of gravitational pull of the archetypes that are real to it. So a person's genetical existence leads to the possibility of their subjective existence, but suddenly after there's a sort of, it's like the moment subjective data was kind of received, the objectivity no longer was lost in one way. So the forbidden, whatever the forbidden fruit was in the Abrahamic context of the origin of the world, that forbidden fruit was, whatever it was, the bite after was a multidimensional reality. The fall of man is the conceptual separation. The fact that a person could be less in a world that's just all one moment. You have to keep the spirit of performance alive. It's strange, but that's the only way we can honor our ancestors. Life is very fascinating. It's kind of like this. It's a moment of intelligence. And this moment appears in the waking state of the human being as an endless spherical awareness. So wherever you are right now, if you're sitting, standing, whatever, you have a spherical awareness. You might even think you don't see what's behind your eyes, but let me tell you, your mind is so advanced that from the edges of your peripheral vision, it can assume and create how behind you looks. So in some sense, it gets a sense of what everything is. So the mind is eventually, once it's given freedom, your mind will increase in speed. And so this is a strange thought. You'd be like, Mr.Within, are you telling me my mind can go at a different speed? And Mr.Within's like, yeah, but it's not that your mind goes at a different speed. You're actually not going anywhere. You're a moment of still observance, and then the movement of the subjective phenomena becomes observant. And then the objective phenomena, based on how much you free it from your thought, moves in accordance to other rhythms. These other rhythms automatically, due to the nature of your subconscious kind of conditioning, like think of it this way, the illusion is better than nothing. What does that mean? That means what if I told you the concept of truth was hollow? What would we as a civilization do about that? We would of course have to move our attention to the next thought. And so when I say thoughts have different speeds, I'll give you a personal experience I had. In 2010, I was, it was the most Buddhist point of my life. And I can tell you that I found myself, I won't tell you the details too much, but in 2010, I found myself literally sitting beside a fountain, a stone fountain, and I literally had my hands, like all my fingertips, connected to one another symmetrically, and I was just looking. I had my fingers connected, and I felt I had reached a point of inevitable failure. I felt I had failed something. I felt like something I had to hold on to I had lost. So in that moment, as I'm kind of thinking, I'm taking deep breaths. That's the best thing I've kind of learned. Buddhism has brought an incredible wealth of attention to the power of breathing. Buddhist people are very smart. Their ancestors were incredibly smart, you know? Freedom from what could have never been there in the first place leads to the ultimate intellectual position. The ultimate intellectual position is not an agnostic viewpoint where the person is on the fence of something. The ultimate intellectual position is an ability to reach a sort of neutrality. It's as if from whatever degree or hierarchy or spectrum you find yourself, find the zero of your spectrum. That's where truth will be multidimensional. Okay, what that means is what you are, you said it's like the way we enter this world is different, but the way we leave it is the same. Whew. Sorry guys, I don't know how to say it. I was sitting beside a fountain. I was breathing, aware of my breathing, kind of rhythmic breathing. Easiest way to align your breathing is to make it sound like ocean waves, go by the same rhythms. And what I'm trying to say is that in that moment I was sitting by the fountain, I felt this inevitability. And then I noticed in my exhale, my thoughts would move faster than I would normally think. So I was suddenly getting access to a stream of thought that I notice instantly this is not the speed I normally think of things. Right? So the way thoughts is moving is if it was moving much faster than I was like, why is this kind of occurring? And so in some sense I kind of noticed the subjective realm is kind of like a room we're in, where in that room there's various influences that we cannot see or we cannot even conceptualize, or our language is not even made for it, right? So it's like there are certain challenges in trying to make the unconscious conscious. That's the beauty of it though. Thanks for tuning in, guys. I guess this is it for this talk. I tend to say a story. I guess I'll share one story before I go. It is the story of Guru Padmasambhava, a sort of Buddhic figure from kind of great source of Tibetan Buddhism. And so the story of Guru Padmasambhava is that at the age of 8, he incarnated as an 8-year-old child from a lotus in the middle of a pond. And right when he incarnated, at the age of 8, he straight went to the water spirit, the lake spirits, and started enlightening the lake spirits. Suddenly, the story gets even more intense. Out of nowhere, what occurs is that this king adopts this kid. This king's caravan is kind of moving, and the king is literally like suddenly he's moving right there. He sees this like young kid by the fountain, by this pond, kind of teaching the lake spirits or whatever. And he's like, oh my god, I'm gonna adopt this kid. How legendary of a king would I be if I do this? And so the king does it. He adopts this random kid he finds, you know. And this Guru Padmasambhava eventually ends up being grown up as this kind of like next level kind of enlightened person, but eventually something happens, he gets exiled. Anyways, on his path, he eventually, this is where the story I want to tell you begins. Guru Padmasambhava, this very enlightened kind of man in his like, I don't know, 30s or something, he's gone by this river, and he's gone by this river, and he sees there's this incredibly beautiful girl, this princess. He doesn't know she's a princess yet, you know, but there's this princess there who's just crying looking at the river, as if this princess maybe is thinking of jumping into the river, right? And so in that moment, it's kind of strange. Guru Padmasambhava has conversations with this girl, and she suddenly changed her mindset, changes instantly. She kind of like totally realizes some new things. And so what happens is there's a spy, and she was actually a princess. So the spy goes and tells the king, and eventually Guru Padmasambhava is taken by guards. The princess and Guru Padmasambhava are taken to the king, and the king's like, I'm gonna make a kind of like, I'm gonna give a message to the people, you know. And so what the king does is he tells his soldiers to bring firewood, and they just put it on the ground, and they're getting ready to burn Guru Padmasambhava. And the king's giving a speech, and he's like, any man who goes near my daughter will burn, you know, something like that, you know. And so when he says something like that, Guru Padmasambhava, the princess, is shouting at her father, like, you don't understand, Dad, what are we doing with the father? And so in that moment, Guru Padmasambhava looks at this princess, and she's screaming. She's screaming at the king. And the king is like, his ears are on a different throne. And so the king in that moment, before he gives the command, Guru Padmasambhava smiles at the princess as if like, nothing, no big deal, you know. And so what he does is he walks before the king says anything in front of all the townspeople and the king. He walks right to the things and sits in this lotus kind of meditation position, you know, and he closes his eyes. The dude starts meditating in the middle of like where they want to burn him. And so what happens is in that moment they make it happen. So what happens is the king's like, burn him, and they start the fire. They start this fire, and this fire burns, and the king is laughing and looking at it with wrath and like power at all the townspeople. It's like, don't mess with me, people, you know, like. And so what happens is suddenly, one by one, gasps are being heard. Like the audience is like freaking out. The townspeople are like all this kind of like a mob mentality kind of people, like suddenly are getting shocked. They see the ashes, the fire turn into ashes, and Guru Padmasambhava sitting there as if the fire never touched him. And so Guru Padmasambhava stands up, and in that moment the townspeople and the king suddenly realize what kind of world they're in. That's the power, that's true power, where the world's teaching is shared. So in that story, there's a kind of notion of a liberative force that arises from the inner dimensions towards the outer. 4 billion years of evolution, and this science project called humanity is here, and Mr.Within is saying it needs to be attended to. It needs to be attended to with a newfound excitement for what else the world could mean. Anyways, guys, thanks for tuning in. Much blessings and namaste.